Let's see. We got Steve. Steve, who is calling in from Nebraska. Steve, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Yeah, happy holidays to you and Jimmy. Well, I was calling about Dan Goler, Goler, DMT, laser matrix experiment. Is that something you're familiar with?
Not at all. I cannot say I'm familiar with that. Is that familiar to you, Jimmy?
No.
All right. What's up with Dan Goler? What's he know that I don't?
Okay, yeah, he's a fellow simulationist. He on his program, he claims that if you take DMT and then you shine a diffracted laser light onto a blank white screen and you look through the laser, you'll be able to see some kind of like a matrix code, like a simulation code running. And he claims that he's run this, that he's replicated this experiment for dozens of other people who've claimed to have the same experience. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were about something like that.
I have heard of this guy, and you know why I've heard of this guy? It's because of Joe fucking Rogan. Did you get this from Joe Rogan? Because they talked about this on Joe Rogan recently, and that's how I know about this.
Yeah, he was. I think I didn't get it on that show per se, but I believe he has been. Maybe he was on Joe Rogan's program.
Okay, that's how I heard. I knew this. Okay, so I don't listen to Watch. I don't support Joe Rogan personally. I think at this point he's done more harm than good, but that's my personal opinions aside. I get Joe Rogan clips, from folks that do watch him, and also just because he's a popular figure in our space. So I try to, see what's happening, what people are talking about. And yeah, I did hear about this guy, and I read some interesting comments about this guy. In particular, this idea that I don't know, if you take DMT, you're going to see things. It's just, I don't think being on a drug that messes with your perception of reality is just going to be a reliable metric for knowing anything about the world. And if you shine lasers in people's eyes, people are going to see stuff, right? I have never done any psychedelics, but I have done DMT.
We don't want to do anything dangerous like that.
I've told this story before. I have smoked marijuana in the past, but also I did DMT really kind of twice, in the same day, and it didn't do much for me. And I mainly did it because I thought it would be a funny story to talk about on Truth Wanted, to be honest with you. And you know what? You see stuff on there, and people say you get access to another reality, or you're seeing something that you're not supposed to see. Some people talk about the machine elves. I don't know. It's just man, I don't know. I don't get it. It doesn't do anything for me. I don't know why people talk about how amazing it is and how much stuff they've learned. For me, it really didn't do much. And I can't imagine that shining lasers in people's eyes is really going to tell you much of anything, particularly.
It's not that they would want to. I don't think that would be a safe thing, but they shine the light on like a blank white screen, the laser light, and you look through the laser certain way onto the screen, and you can see some kind of a code running. When I chatted with him, I said, well, I'm just primed. You're just priming me to see this code.
Yes, if you program somebody with the conditions that they'll experience when they're on drugs, and then they take those drugs, and while the drugs are kicking in, they're saying, all right, now I'm going to see this thing. Now I'm going to see this thing. Right? You're likely to see it. I think that's the way a lot of things work. We, I don't know, it's not just drugs, but we kind of absorb different perspectives for when situations, for when we arrive in those situations and then experience those things, near-death experiences, right? Oh, I saw the white light. I saw the white light. Well, if you hear your whole life that you're going to see a white light, and then you kind of lose consciousness and see a white light, I feel like that is the same. Dan, you're making faces.
It's just like the reason why we interpret code as zeros and ones, right, is because that's a visual representation of a physical process that's happening. If there was a code to reality, we wouldn't be seeing it as zeros and ones unless we had like a monitor that was connected to a computer that showed us that. I don't know why our eyes would show us the actual zeros and ones. It's just very silly to me. I don't know. Go ahead, Steve.
It's not binary. He said the code's not binary. He said when I see it, it's going to be something unlike anything I've been trying to see. So yeah, I ordered some mimosa tree bark, and I've got a process to extract the DMT and purify it, and I'm gonna write down my experience in the code, and I'll report on it. So just kind of be interesting to see what I come up with on this. So,
but again, my point still stands here. Okay, a code. A visual representation of a code is unnecessary for a code to function. There's no reason why you would have to see anything. The only reason why we see code is because it's more accessible for like machine. We turn code into other kinds of code that's more readable for machines, right? We don't typically work in machine language, like literal zeros and ones, because most of us just don't operate that way. We with that, in that kind of a assembly language, we usually put it into higher level languages because lower level ones aren't as good. So it doesn't make sense for us to even have an ability to even see it, because that's just a representation of, again, physical processes that are happening. I don't know. It's just there's no rhyme or reason to it. And I don't know why we'd be able to see it with our eyes somehow. It's just very silly. Again, hard for you to take seriously. But clearly, Steve, maybe you have a different opinion than I do.
Well, I think it's worth further investigation because dozens of people have claimed to see this code as well. He's replicated the experiment, and everybody seems to have the same experience. So,
well,
there's something more to it than just.
I just want to clarify. We're not encouraging people to do drugs. Okay. So I just want to say, if you say it's worth further investigation, I just want to make sure that I'm not associated with saying go do DMT. So I don't know.
Well, let me talk to you about this, Steve. Why do you think this is worth investigating more so than any other sort of consistent phenomenon that's ever happened between people's drug experience?
Well, I think this is just kind of an interesting thing. If there's some kind of weird glitch in the matrix, maybe this is something there. But if you can check this guy out, his name's Dan Goller, Goller. He's got a program, I think it's called Simulation Talk, and he's got a documentary out on this he's made. So, but I'll see if there's more to it than just people tripping.
But why does this give you any credibility? Why believe this guy's take on what happens at DMT more than the people that take DMT and say that they see the machine elves, or the people that take DMT and say that they see aliens? Like, what makes this guy's DMT experience more real?
It's just not his. It's dozens of people have this shared experience.
Sure, but again, multiple people have talked about machine elves, right? Like, multiple people have talked about other kinds of experiences on DMT. Do you think it's possible that maybe we could just have similar biologies in that we tend to see similar things when we're on similar drugs?
Well, it would be kind of odd that we would see some kind of some kind of code running through a laser. I just don't know why people would.
It doesn't even sound like it was code, right? You said it wasn't zeros and ones or words. It was like images of things, right?
He said it was as text. That he described it as something that looked kind of. It wasn't it was like an alien language, something maybe a little bit similar to Hebrew or Japanese, but it wasn't Japanese or Hebrew.
So he wasn't even sure if it was code then. How can he know it's code if he can't even read it?
And what's an alien language?
Something that's not, you're not familiar with. It's some kind of characters in text, but it's not some.
Yeah. So then, to Dan's point, if he couldn't read it and he's not familiar with it, how did he know it was code?
Well, that's his interpretation of it, and that's an interesting point. So that's something I'll have to bring up with him.
So if you're going to do drugs and then shine a laser, I feel like, to Dan's point, like, yeah, we all have similar biology, right? Our eyes probably are made of the same parts. Well, not probably. Our eyes have the same parts. They function the same way. They see a laser while they're also being manipulated by a foreign substance. Maybe the experience is similar, but to call it an alien language is, I mean, that's a big leap. That is a huge leap. And I just want to say, I'm not going to compare Japanese and Hebrew to an alien language, all right? Because those are human languages. So I just want to make that point too.
All right. Yeah, I know he said it wasn't Hebrew or Japanese, but he said it looked somewhat similar. I'll have to look at this myself, look into it, and see what I can come up with, and see what I see in this. So, and I'll try to remember the experience. I'll try to write this down if I'm able to. So, and then I can report back on it. So it's not something I could probably email, but because it's not text, we could get off a computer. But it'd be something maybe to write down and scan. Maybe somebody can make something more of it.
If it's meaningful to you, maybe. But what am I supposed to do with somebody else's report about a drug trip that they had? Honestly, like, what is somebody supposed to do with that information? How can it be reliably tested or informed in any way, right? Because I can't access your personal experience. You have a qualia that I don't have access to, and so does everybody. So there's always going to be that problem. But the additional problem is that people experience all kinds of things on substances, and inevitably there's going to be some patterns, right? How many world cultures talk about entities that could be described as demons, for example? Right? We hear it in the Bible, but there's also, Japanese folk traditions that talk about similar kinds of entities, and they didn't have access to psilocybin, as far as I'm aware. I think there's something that has to be said about the human imagination as well, right? Like, I just don't know, if you could answer to me, what new insight could we gain from you doing these drugs and having this laser experience? What can we learn? How can we compare it to anybody else's experience? Like, because I don't know the answer to that.
Right. Yeah. No, I get your point. So it's something that it needs to be documented better. I think people have to write down what this code is that they're seeing, and see if anybody can make anything of it. So I just thought it'd be kind of interesting experiment people could do, or because it's not just this guy that's had this experience, but dozens of people had under the same circumstances, the same experience.
Yeah, I think that just speaks to Jimmy's point about being primed for particular experiences, right? Especially with something like DMT. I don't know. Look, I can't tell you what to do with life. You do what you want with that, Steve. But I think, personally, there are better uses of your time if you want to understand the world, right? And that's not me trying to be a hater. That's not me trying to insult the way you live your life. You do what you want. But people's drug experiences, and even shared drug experiences, to me, don't really offer too much benefit other than you kind of saw something kind of cool, But that's just my take. Anything else you want to ask, Steve, before we let you go?
Yeah, you guys have a happy holiday, and thanks for taking my call.
Hey,
thanks, Steve. Have a good one.